I'm Doug Musio. This is a special Middle East edition of City Talk. It's time for Musio's semi-annual postgraduate seminar in Middle East politics. And you can audit the course. A lot's happened since our last session. The Annapolis meeting, Turkish troops crossing Iraq's border, Bush and Rice in the Middle East, President Bush swishing swords with the Saudis after begging for oil, and naval confrontation with Iran. Joining me once again is a distinguished Middle East hand, Richard Murphy, former U.S. ambassador to Mauritania, Syria, the Philippines, and Saudi Arabia. He has served as U.S. Secretary of State for Near Eastern and Asian Affairs and has been named Career Ambassador. He was a Senior Fellow for the Middle East at the Council on Foreign Relations for 15 years. Ambassador Murphy is a frequent TV commentator and widely consulted expert, and my tutor in these once-a-semester seminars. Thank you, sir. Welcome back.
Great pleasure.
You're recently back from the Middle East, and you were there in November. Talk to us about these meetings with Iraqi officials that you've been conducting for months now.
Well, this is a group of Iraqi members of parliament, about 24, and selected across the whole range of Iraqi politics, the factions of the Shia, the factions of the Sunni, and both parties among the Kurds. And we've had 3 sessions now. We hope to have a further one at the end of March. Mm-hmm. And the effort is, it's called sustained dialogue, where you keep the same people together on very troubling situations. What are you going to do to, in this case, work more closely together for reconciliation in Iraq? Mm-hmm. This sustained dialogue group or institute has worked on other problems like in Nagorno-Karabakh and the civil war in Tajikistan, okay. Central Asia, the Armenian disagreements. But in this one, the difference is that we, as the United States, trying to be moderators along with a British colleague, we're the big gorilla in the cage. Mm-hmm. We're not just objective observers. Sure. That said, I think I can see some pulling together of this group.
Yeah, when we talked in September, they were sitting around, but they couldn't give up their grudges. Have they given them up? They haven't given them up, but have they recognized the futility of the grudges, maybe?
Well, you never give up grudges. Yeah. You learn to live with them, and I don't think they've given up hope that their days of glory might return. But one of them said at the end, and I thought this was a good forward-looking sign for the group's future discussions. It was a Kurd, actually. He said, what we as Kurds have to do is recognize that our efforts to sign oil deals should not be seen by the others as an effort to break up Iraq. And as far as the Sunnis go, they have to realize that their days of top leadership and virtually sole leadership are over, but they can expect real partnership in politics. And the Shia, who are now top players, they have to realize they cannot govern alone. So that was a pretty good formula for
right. I mean, but that's a formula.
Yeah.
Are any of these 3 realities about to occur? Are we on the road to these realities? Your sense of the region right now?
Well, my sense within this group, let's say,
okay.
They were selected as a microcosm of Iraqi political forces. Mm-hmm. And the group will only have significance if, as they develop their dialogue, they take it back sure. home and it spreads not just to their political leaders, but to the population as a whole. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how well that's going to succeed.
But it's certainly worth the effort.
It's worth the effort, and it's as we say, it's not doing any harm anyway.
Right. Let's continue with Iraq. You know, the surge. Before we begin with the surge, because that's a piece of this. What is U.S. policy in Iraq? I think I ask you this question every time we sit down. And what should it be?
Well, the policy is to lay the groundwork for Iraq becoming, in its own way, a functioning democratic state. That's
the goal of the policy.
That's the goal.
What are the actions that would create these outcomes?
Well, the surge was one of them. 30,000 combat troops to give enough quietude on the city streets of Baghdad and in a couple of the major provinces that would give the politicians a breathing space to pull together.
And it seems, at least to this observer who's reading news reports and not on the ground and intimately involved, that to that extent it's worked. But have they used it? Well, the question is that true? And if it is true, have the Iraqi players used this space toward this national reconciliation?
There are some signs. I think there are few. You can chart the drop in violence. Mm-hmm. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But then you're always hit with the question: is that going to outlive the surge? The surge, right, we have made pretty plain, is going to come to an end this summer.
Right. Gates said that they would draw down 30,000 to about 130,000.
Puts us back where we were before the surge.
And go ahead.
And what's happened in Baghdad and in some exchanges by political leaders, I can see some sign of encouragement. Like Abdulaziz Hakim, who's the head of the major Shiite party, made, to me, an unexpected public statement about a month ago saying this awakening, which the Shia had said was potentially very dangerous because it was among the Sunnis and the Americans were out there encouraging it and starting to arm and pay these Sunni tribesmen in provinces like Anbar and Diyala. That was not necessarily a bad thing. Well, that was a break away from earlier Shia pronouncement that this is a threat to the state. This is a future militia that's going to rebel against the state.
So what you're suggesting is that there are these tectonic changes that are going on beneath the surface that might someday burst out onto the,
Yeah,
I'm not good at geological metaphors.
Well, I got exposed to geology recently at the Museum of Natural History right in this city, and the fellow described tectonics change as the amount that your fingernail grows in 1 year. So the continents are about to collide someday in the future, but it's Iraqi politics, to call it tectonic is pretty pessimistic.
Okay. So bottom line here, in Richard Murphy's mind, there's always room for optimism, but there's a real justification for something.
We're at a moment where he who tells you we're going to win or we're going to lose, I think is wrong. Nobody knows yet.
What about relating this to the presidential race? What do we do with the troops there? I mean, do we have John McCain's it may be necessary to keep them for 100 years, or do we have the Democrats' movement toward some form of significant withdrawal over a specified time period?
Well, take the Democrats first. Early withdrawal is about all they seem to have to offer the public so far.
Right.
They haven't said how many and how fast. At least that's not. Right. There's no one view on that. From the Iraqi standpoint, taking this group I've been talking with, just about all of them say, set a date. Some of us would like it sooner, some of us easier with you staying, but we all want to know this is going to end.
Why? What's the reasoning?
Well, I think call it cultural, historical. This is a people that was trampled over the centuries from Mesopotamian days on.
So we're dominated, we're occupiers,
colonialized. We're the latest twist in colonial history for many of them.
But a benign at least intention?
No. Well, it's hard to see beyond the M16 and the tanks.
And
they don't know how benign it is.
Okay.
And they, as I say, some have an interest in our staying longer, some shorter. The Ba'ath Party that used to govern the state says nothing can be discussed about the future till every last American soldier is out of there. Well, that's not going to happen, and that's not the majority view in Iraq today. But I think for the Democrats, their problem is they haven't come up with a plan yet, except early withdrawal.
What about McCain, though?
Well, I don't agree with his. I understand his appeal. I don't agree with his optimism, if you will, because it's all very well to say, if we stay 100 years, it's not going to be 100 years of fighting. Did we have to fight with the Germans or the Japs? No. We settled in and we became allies.
But that analogy, these are totally different cultures, different times.
Much. Well, the Germans and the Japanese had their differences, but the gulf between both of them and the Iraqis, I think, is enormous. And their resistance, their dislike of a foreigner sitting on their head, and in this day and age, a non-Muslim Western power sitting on their head, is making them just furious. So I don't see the development of a relationship as long as we talk in terms of a 100-year presence. I think they're going to resist it. Now, we didn't lose any troops in Germany or Japan after their unconditional surrender. The Iraqis didn't give us an unconditional surrender. That's another difference. But the memories being what they are, I think we're today in a gray area where you can't say the surge is going to have a lasting benefit. We'll see.
Okay.
We'll go down and we'll hold for a bit. I think I'll be surprised if we go below 130 in a hurry.
Okay. Let's move the location of our discussion now to Israel and Palestine. In the intervening 6 months between our last conversation and today, we've had this Annapolis meeting, which at one time was the Annapolis Summit, to provide movement toward a settlement of the issues. And the Times on November 28th has as its headline, and I'm asking you the likelihood of it: Israeli and Palestinians set goal of a treaty in 2008. Is this even remotely possible?
Treaty is a great term, and to me it implies a very detailed set of understandings, codified on paper and widely accepted by the two parties concerned with their population.
Or multilaterally, right.
And you're not going to see that.
Okay.
You could see an agreement on principles, what should be the guidelines, agreed guidelines, explicitly agreed to by the Palestinian, the Israeli leaders, and supported, blessed by the United States to carry the whole affair forward into the next administration. I can't see us getting any further than that.
Okay. Let's look at it from here till next January 21st or November 5th after the election. Does the Bush administration have the time, number one, and the will and the skill to, if not pull off a peace treaty, to at least have the agreement on these general principles? For example, the quartet, U.S., the United Kingdom, the Union, and the Soviet Union recognize Israel, renounce terrorism, and abide by the peace deals. Is any of this, or do we have to wait for the next American administration?
Well, there is a position in Washington that set a very strict set of preconditions on the Palestinians, and that is the party of Hamas that has been in a fight with Fatah.
Right.
We get along very well with the head of Fatah, the president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas. But Hamas has been consigned to the realm of the evil, the terrorist, and don't deal with them, don't talk with them, freeze them out.
Let me just interrupt. This seems to be a pattern of at least this administration's policy and probably previous administration's policy toward the region, and that is we don't talk to everybody, that we clearly take sides, that we set preconditions that almost preclude the other actors from engaging with each other and with us. It seems counterproductive here.
Well, counterproductive particularly, in my opinion, because it weakens the very ones we want to support. Abbas, if he could come to the table with Ehud Olmert on Palestinian-Israeli issues, if he could come to the table side by side with Hamas but in charge, he would have a stronger hand of negotiating with the Israelis.
Okay, how could we, the United States, facilitate that?
I don't think we're going to change because the heritage of you are a terrorist.
Yeah, but you're
we
making
don't
the
talk
policy
to terrorists.
now. I've just made you Secretary of State.
Oh, that's generous of you.
Thank you.
Fate worse than death these days.
Right. We're going to get into that. But what would be your advice? I mean, certainly talking with them is a necessary first step. Well, what goes beyond that? What begins to make these people stick together? How do they transcend their grudges and their history?
We've tried to defeat Hamas by stopping all commercial transactions, by stopping investment, freezing the banking system, and as we saw, they came very close to the real misery level, and then they blew up the fence between them and Gaza and Egypt.
And they went on a 3-day shopping spree.
3-day shopping spree. Well,
any impact on American policymakers?
I don't see it. I don't see it having an impact. I think it showed that you cannot put that kind of pressure on the 1.5 million people there in Gaza and not expect a violent popular reaction. This made Hamas much more popular with its own population in Gaza.
And aren't we, the United States, doing the same thing in Lebanon by freezing out Hezbollah?
Well, we've given a bear hug to the March 14 movement. That was the successor to the late Prime Minister of Lebanon, Rafiq Hariri. And again, here I think we could be more supportive and more effectively supportive if we were quieter about it. But Hezbollah and the opposition has been consigned to the evil servants of Syrian policy and not regarded as Lebanese politicians, which they are.
But it seemed to me that there was, particularly around Annapolis, there was relief among Arab countries that the United States was re-engaged, even though they doubted, in a sense, both our motives and on our effectiveness, because the administration, in a sense, has denied the centrality of this conflict.
No, that's why I don't think the American government, this administration, is irrelevant in the Middle East, even if it is in the last months of its tenure.
Okay.
What we can do, and the expectations that we can do something significant, is still out there.
Okay. What conditions would have to exist for that to happen?
Well,
I know it's a tough one.
Yeah, I think from the Israeli standpoint, they have to themselves find a way to bring about a dialogue with Hamas, and who do represent a strong trend in the Palestinian community. Not necessarily the biggest, but an important one. So if they can find a way to talk to them, I am relatively confident that Hamas would find a way to revive its talk of the last several years that we're ready for a long-term ceasefire with Israel. Politically, it's easy to kiss that off and say, well, that's meaningless. You can break a ceasefire at any time. We want real peace. You're not going to get real peace in the first act of this play. And we're still in that very beginning of this whole act.
One of the problems, it seems to me, is that both Olmert and Abbas are weak leaders. They don't have a unified country behind them. So there are the internal divisions that prevent them from moving.
Yeah, Olmert is confronted with the threat of the Shas party.
Sure.
You start talking about Jerusalem, we're out of here. And we'll try to destroy the government in the process. Now, maybe they could, maybe they couldn't pull down the government, But he's very much aware of having to balance all of these forces in the Israeli political system, and he has a weak hand at the moment.
Okay, let's look at Annapolis in another way. Lots of analysts looked at it and said the real target of this whole activity was Iran, to bring together the other Arab states in a sense to isolate Iran, part of this U.S. policy of containment. I mean, is that an accurate view? Do we have a policy of containment, and is this a wise policy?
Well, there certainly is a policy of containing Iran. We've been trying to do that ever since 1979,
Right.
1980.
Okay.
But here again, we're putting preconditions as we're putting on the Hamas. Hamas has to recognize Israel flat out first thing before anything happens. Iran has to suspend all of its work on its nuclear program in order to talk to us. That's the sort of concession, if you will, or accommodation that you get once you start talking. They're not going to, they've made it plain, they're not going to start talking on that basis.
It's preclusionary at the outset. Why pursue such a policy? Simply because you don't want an agreement? Or is it just ignorance that, I don't know, you tell me.
I'm sure they'd like an agreement in Washington, but they seem to assume, to me at least, that they assume we have a power which we just don't have to dictate another community in the case of the Palestinians or another nation in the case of Iran, precisely how what they have to do before we will engage seriously with them in negotiations.
Does Iran, in our previous conversation in September, you alluded to the fact that sometimes we treat countries as powers that have this ability to act that they really don't, and in a sense we might be exaggerating the depredations or the ambitions of Iran in this particular situation.
I don't remember exactly what I said. That's the beauty of meeting only every 6 months.
That's right.
But I do feel very much that we exaggerate the power of our adversaries. Iran and the United States had been at odds for, what is it now, almost 30 years. They have not become a great power in the meantime. They are a power in the region.
Okay.
They are feared in many parts of the Arab world, in the Gulf, small Gulf states. They're very apprehensive about Iran.
Saudi Arabia.
The Saudi Arabian
I mean,
scene.
particularly the Sunni states.
The Sunni states, the Sunni community in Iraq, very fearful that Iran is going to be ending up as top commander of their destiny. But the fact is they're not a major power. They're not a great power. They are a power that wants to be recognized as a leader in that region, and they are. And of course, we helped make them that by knocking out the Taliban on the one hand and Saddam Hussein on the other. But that's history now.
That's a totally different story, yeah. and we've done that story.
Right.
We've done that story before.
We've got to find what you hear from Iranians over and over again is we want some respect. Now, you can't quantify what respect is and how to give it and how to show it, but they're asking for something that they feel we haven't been ready to give them at all.
And going to one of your sites of your representation of the United States, Saudi Arabia, that seems to be the two actors that are the focus of this conflict, if you will. Saudi Arabia being an ally, huge arms deal with the United States. What's the prospect in the Gulf and the relationship of those two countries and our relationship to Saudi Arabia?
I don't think our relationship has changed much with Saudi Arabia over the years. There was this period of sharp resentment after 9/11 when those young Saudis were the main body of the involved in the attack on the World Trade Towers.
And one of the the nurturers of Islamic fundamentalism.
Right. And there was the conviction that the whole Saudi educational system is geared to terrorism against the outsider, against the United States in particular. I think we've calmed down considerably on that. They've made some changes in their own educational system. I've been trying to track that, cutting out the really hate messages about why Muslims shouldn't engage with
So
non-Muslims.
change comes, but it comes slowly?
It comes slowly. It comes slowly. Yeah, we're impatient, but I think the relationship, the Saudis appreciate the security that we've provided to them. They haven't agreed with how we've conducted ourselves in Iraq. I think the last thing they want to see is an American attack on Iran because of the repercussions on them. But they still value the relationship, no question.
One of the things that struck me, and it was the visual image of George Bush visiting Saudi Arabia and swishing swords while he's begging for more oil. What does that tell us about our relationship to the Saudis, and as well as the administration policy here?
Well, it tells us that he's pretty good at sword play. No royal family member was cut during that exhibition.
Yeah, good thing they didn't give him a hunting gun.
We won't go there.
No, we won't. Go ahead.
It's a balance for us, which we've and the Saudis have maintained over the decades, which is we enjoy steady access to their oil reserve, their production, and they have confidence that we will keep outside enemies at bay. We've never pledged to defend any of the regimes in the region.
Right.
That's foolish to do that, and they wouldn't want it. But they have felt threatened, in particular by Iran over the years, and I think they value the fact that we're ready to support, that we're ready to provide high technology in terms of the weaponry that we'll sell to them.
Got 30 seconds left. Your overall sense of the region and your reasonable hope for the future?
Well, I think we'll work our way through this. We're up to our neck in Iraq at the moment, and there are some hopeful signs, some not so hopeful, but we've got to, I guess, stay steady. And I don't mean by that I support a 100-year presence or even a 10-year presence. I don't know what it's going to take, but I can't support a quick, full withdrawal, and I doubt that anybody that comes into office next year is going to be supportive of that. I think we can get the message across that we are ready to work closely with all of the elements that are ready to work with us.
Okay. Excellent. So you're coming back in 6 months?
If invited.
You're invited.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Doug Musio. Let us know what you think about this show. You can reach us at CUNY.tv. When you get there, click on the bar that says Contact Us and send your email. Whatever it is. Thanks, no thanks, obnoxious, do it. Send it.